Next, we're in Burlington, Vermont, where Patrick Andrews is in court on stalking charges. As the judge begins the proceedings, Andrews glances over his shoulder before looking directly into the camera. No one is aware of what he's preparing to do. Court deputies pounce on a desperate Andrews who's trying to kill himself with a pen. Watch as the camera swings back toward Andrews as he stabs himself in the neck. 4 court deputies struggle to wrestle the pen away from him. Then, after he's finally taken to the ground, someone in the gallery pleads with the judge and begs Andrews not to harm himself. Officers are finally able to gain control. At first, it appears Andrews will be taken back into custody without further incident. But he's not ready to cooperate. After falling forward into the wall, it appears he throws his head backwards, striking one of the deputies behind him. And on his way out, Andrews attempts to break a window with his forehead. Patrick Andrews would later be found guilty of criminal harassment. Next, we go to Douglas County, Georgia, for the sentencing of Jose Torres and Kayla Norton. The couple, who have 3 kids together, were convicted of making terroristic threats and violating a street gang act, while Torres was also found guilty of aggravated assault based on brandishing a weapon. It all began with a group calling themselves Respect the Flag, who took to driving around Douglas County in pickup trucks decorated with Confederate flags. When they came upon a child's birthday party, they went after the African-American partygoers, shouting racial slurs and death threats.
Bye, have a good day. Yeah, we see you too, baby. We see you too, baby. See, that's a threat. That's a threat. Stop that truck. That's a threat.
Police arrived, forming a barrier between the trucks and the party, and the group then drove away.
So could y'all stay here? Yeah, I don't feel safe.
Because there is guns.
The couple, while not captured on camera, were part of the confrontation. And according to eyewitnesses, Norton handed Torres a loaded shotgun, which he proceeded to point at the party guests. Prosecutors claim Torres and others threatened to blow the heads off the children. Despite the threats, thankfully no one was injured. 2 others involved in the incident received prison sentences, while about a dozen others did not get any prison time. They pled guilty to misdemeanors or entered pretrial diversion programs. Before the sentencing of Norton and Torres, Norton makes an emotional plea to the court.
I do accept responsibility for what I've done. I know I was in the wrong. But I want you all to know that that is not me. That is not me. That's not him. I would never walk up to you and say those words to you. I'm so sorry that happened to you.
After Norton's finished, one of the victims, Bryant, gives a heartfelt response.
I forgive you. You can't forgive all of you. I'm not a man here. I do. I forgive you. And to your family, I'm sorry. It has become my fault. I don't have him. They hate me hard. And I really forgive.
Judge William McLean was much less forgiving. He sentenced Norton to 6 years in prison. Torres received a sentence of 13 years. Next, we head to Bentonville, Arkansas. Outside the courthouse, defendants are being transported to the county jail, including Diego Jose Zayas Martinez. He's been charged with making terroristic threats and stabbing a man. He was just in court at his bond hearing. Bail was set at $100,000. Watch as the deputy escorts the men to the bus. There's Zayas Martinez. Like the other defendants, he's wearing handcuffs. But his feet are free, so he decides to use them. Let's take a closer look. Zayas Martinez makes a break for it just beyond the grasp of the second deputy, and the officers immediately give chase. But one quickly stops, deciding to stay with the remaining prisoners. Zayas Martinez makes it to the parking lot. One of the deputies isn't far behind. He'll need to pick up the pace, though, if he wants to close the gap. Despite the deputy trying to head him off, Zayas Martinez manages to stay one step ahead. Looks like he's just hopped a fence. And with that, he could be home free. Not quite. Later that day, a sheriff's deputy gets him help from a concerned citizen who tells him the man he's after is hiding beneath her house. Zayas Martinez is captured and taken back to the courthouse, where his original bond is increased to $500,000, and he faces an additional charge of third-degree escape. Next, we're in Tampa, Florida, for a truly bizarre story.
The media is here and has an interest in your case.
This is 37-year-old Dee Dee Moore.
And God knows I would never take another human being's life. So if I can live with that, then I can live with anything.
She's accused of murdering her friend and business associate, 47-year-old Abraham Shakespeare. 4 years earlier, Shakespeare made local news after he won $30 million in the Florida lottery. Moore later befriended him, then gained control of his assets, posturing as a financial advisor.
The money was like a curse to her, and now it's a curse to me.
Then, shortly after Moore's financial takeover, Shakespeare disappeared. His body was later found buried underneath a large slab of concrete at Moore's boyfriend's home. He'd been shot twice in the chest. Dee Dee Moore was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. As her trial begins, courtroom cameras focus on what becomes the many faces and emotions of Dee Dee Moore. But what started as quirky behavior quickly becomes a major distraction to jurors, who are told to disregard her outbursts, which range from hysterical crying to angry objections. Moore's behavior is also called out by the judge.
Ms. Moore, I've cautioned you throughout these proceedings that any gestures, facial expressions, audible comments showing approval or disapproval are not acceptable. Ms. Moore, I'm going to tell you once again, you need to compose yourself. Do you understand that? You are to compose yourself. That is to stop. Do you understand me?
Yes, sir.
But Moore's bizarre antics don't end there.
My tongue swelled up really bad last night, and they admitted me in the infirmary.
Perhaps in an effort to gain sympathy from the jury, Moore claims she'd suffered a severe medical reaction while in jail the night before.
I had an anaphylactic shock because they gave me a medicine called Bactrim for a kidney infection, and I was allergic to it, so I had an allergic reaction to it.
In addition to her courtroom stunts, the lengths Moore went to cover up Shakespeare's murder, including an offer of sex to bribe an investigator, are also revealed in court.
She wanted me to call Abraham's mother and tell Abraham's mother that I was him.
In the end, it seems Moore's behavior has little impact on the jury.
The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder.
While Moore shakes her head in disbelief, members of Shakespeare's family seem relieved by the conviction. All that's left for Judge Emmett Battles is to announce the sentence. But before that, he doesn't mince words with Moore.
Words that were said here, cold, calculated, cruel, they all apply. Probably the most manipulative person that this court has seen.
Dee Dee Moore receives a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Do you want to shut the cameras off now?
Next, we go all the way back to 2003, when a convicted murderer stood just feet away from a devastated family looking for revenge. On trial is Jerome Boggs, accused of killing Blister Cook and his 4-year-old son, TJ. He's also facing charges of burglary and robbery. Boggs reportedly went to the Cook home to buy marijuana. Once inside, the drug deal turned into a robbery and double murder. Boggs is in court for his arraignment. He's pled not guilty to all charges. In the gallery are members of the victim's family, devastated by this horrific crime. The judge orders Boggs held without bond and sends him back to his cell. Just as that's Blister Cook's brother, Michael, charging towards the defendant. A second brother, Donald Keith, makes an attempt to get at Boggs. While officers handle that situation, a third man makes a run at Boggs. But no luck. He slips out the back door. Luckily for Boggs, there are several officers in the courtroom who prevent those angry family members from getting to Boggs. He's later found guilty of all charges and sentenced to life in prison with no chance for parole.
You know what, Mr. Schwartz? You said that you were ready. And you're telling me you weren't ready?
Next, we're in Cambridge, Illinois, for the trial of 39-year-old Kristen Holtzman. During the previous year, friends and community members rallied around the mother of two after she posted on social media she'd been diagnosed with brain cancer. Numerous fundraisers were organized and raised more than $16,000 to help pay for her treatment. Problem is, Holtzman didn't have cancer. After receiving a complaint, police opened an investigation and looked at her medical records and use of the donation money. When things didn't add up, she was charged with felony theft. As Holtzman's attorney, Jack Schwartz, cross-examines one of the prosecution witnesses, he brings up a criminal charge from the woman's past, but it's one she was never convicted of.
It looks like it was dismissed. However, she was forced to pay restitution.
Schwartz has just made a major legal mistake.
Are you kidding me that it was dismissed and you're bringing up something that was dismissed?
As you can see, the attorney's maneuver really sets off Judge Casey Stengel.
You know what, Mr. Schwartz? You know the rules of Montgomery or the Illinois Supreme Court rules and the rules of evidence regarding impeachment, do you not?
The rules Judge Stengel's referring to are that a witness's criminal history is only allowed in court if it was a felony conviction or a misdemeanor conviction proving dishonesty. In this case, it was neither, but perhaps a backhanded attempt to undermine the witness's credibility.
And how long have you been practicing law to know those rules?
A long time, Judge.
Feeling the judge's wrath, Attorney Schwartz doesn't even look up to answer his questions.
So why did you happen to bring this out as a part of your strategy?
When given an opportunity to patch things up with the judge, this attorney drops the most bizarre excuse in court cam history.
Judge, I became aware of it this morning, and as you know, I only have one eye. Judge, I became aware of it this morning, and as you know, I only have one eye.
Wait a minute, Mr. Schwartz.
You're about to see Judge Stengel go from pretty upset to fuming.
I gave you time for a recess for you to prepare for this question. To cross-examine this witness, you said that you were ready. And you're telling me you weren't ready?
No, I thought I was ready, Judge.
Well, you know, you made a very serious mistake here, Mr. Schwartz, and there are going to be sanctions because you did this as part of your strategy, and you made a mistake.
The attorney was not sanctioned, but back to the more important issue. Kristen Holtzman's allegedly false cancer claim and felony theft of more than $16,000 in donations. After a 5-day trial, the jury delivers a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Kristen Holtzman, guilty of the offense of theft.
Later at sentencing, Holtzman pleads her case one last time before the judge hands down her punishment.
This crime that I committed is not who I am. And I am 100% positive that if you look at who I was previous to the crime and look at who I am now, you would see that I was a good person.
Judge Stengel doesn't buy it.
You're a complete fraud. And I have no compassion for you.
For felony theft by deception and solicitation, Kristen Holtzman sentenced to 3 years in prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release, and is ordered to pay $16,000 in restitution.
The letters LOL appear in the messages after it was learned that they had killed somebody.
Next, we go to a hearing inside the Genesee County Courthouse in Flint, Michigan. 4 teenagers have pled guilty to manslaughter in the death of 32-year-old Kenneth White. A 5th defendant, 19-year-old Kyle Anger, has already pled guilty as an adult to second-degree murder. The teens threw a 6-pound rock off a highway overpass, puncturing the windshield of a passing car, striking White in the head. The driver, Stephen Anther, seeing his friend injured, immediately called 911 for help. White, a father of 4, engaged to be married, died shortly afterwards at the hospital. The 4 defendants all agreed to plead guilty to manslaughter with one stipulation: that they be tried as juveniles, not adults. Judge Joseph Farah is tasked with accepting or rejecting that stipulation. But first, he hears from the victim's fiancé.
I didn't know how I could tell my son that his daddy was gone and wouldn't be coming home. When I broke the news to my son, he didn't understand. And his mind doctors could fix his daddy. I could see my son's world crashing around him, and I felt helpless. Without him, I did not know how I'd be able to get through life.
As Judge Farah weighs his decision, several factors work against the teens, including the fact that for these boys, dropping objects from overpasses was apparently a regular pastime.
There wasn't one event, nor was it done at a single location. The rocks and other items were gathered from other locations, loaded in a truck, and then driven to overpasses to throw them over. Also thrown at other times at other locations: tire irons, a muffler, a shopping cart, a couch. What was the purpose in this game called overpassing? And when did it stop? When somebody was killed.
Additionally, the teens made light of the horrific crime through dozens of heartless Snapchat messages.
51 times the letters LOL, LMAO, or haha appear in the messages, and many after it was learned that they had killed somebody. Lay low for a while and everything will be fine. Only way you get in trouble is if a, and I won't say the word, spelled rats, so you better hope he didn't give in already, or else we're going to the slammer.
As Kenneth White's grieving mother watches from the gallery, Judge Farah announces his decision.
The proposal for juvenile sentencing is rejected.
Once that decision is issued, the 4 defendants withdraw their guilty plea and choose to go to trial. While awaiting trial, 3 of the teens remain in custody without bond, while a 4th, Alexander Miller, is out on $25,000 bond. As for the 5th defendant, Kyle Anger, who's already pled guilty to second-degree murder, he begins serving his sentence of 39 months to 20 years in a Michigan state prison.
They were all in it together. All of them. Equal fall.
That's all for this edition of Court Cam. I'm Dan Abrams. Thanks for watching. Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Abrams, and this is Court Cam.
You ready to take your plea?
I hope you die in prison as well.
That the drugs were there. I did not put the narcotics there.
First up, we head to Jackson County, Florida, for the trial of Zachary Wester. Former sheriff's deputy was charged with 67 counts of racketeering, fabricating evidence, false imprisonment, and possession of controlled substances. Wester's accused of planting drugs in a dozen vehicles during random traffic stops.
It appears to be an illegal narcotic. Do you know anything about that?
All of the drivers denied owning the drugs, but yet most were subsequently arrested. The arrest caused suspicion internally, and in 2018, Wester was suspended. 3 years later, the case went to trial. He pleaded not guilty to all charges.
This is a case about an abuse of an incredible power, about the abuse of the incredible trust that we all put, we have to put, in law enforcement in a society.
The prosecution relied on the defendant's own body cam footage to help argue their case. Stephen Van, a convicted felon, had recently gotten out of jail when Wester supposedly found methamphetamine in his car.
Have you ever seen this before? No. No, what is that? I'm just trying to figure out how that stuff got in your car. You're going to go to jail today for possession of methamphetamine, okay? Oh, man. I'm serious, dude. Anything. What you want me to do, man?
Like the other drivers who testified, Van gave the officer permission to search his car because he claims he had nothing to hide.
And I knew my truck was clean. I knew it was.
While the jury got to watch most of the traffic stops, some recordings had mysteriously disappeared.
Why in the world would that have been deleted? I wish I knew that answer.
Ironically, body cam footage would become the strongest element in the prosecution's case, especially when it came to Teresa Odom.
Hi, how are you? I'm good.
At first, the officer's polite, even playful.
Anything the vehicle need to be concerned about? Bombs, hand grenades, rocket launchers? Okay.
While Odom stands behind the vehicle, Wester begins his search. Notice as he prepares to put his gloves on, there's a small item in his left hand. Prosecutors argue that Wester is palming a small bag of meth, which he claims to find next to a spoon in the vehicle.
Miss Odom.
It is yogurt, sir.
I know. Okay.
It's yogurt.
How about this, though?
That is not mine. No, sir.
Okay. Now, the white small plastic baggie that was in that spoon that the deputy just showed you on this video, had you ever seen that before?
No, sir.
Was that in your car?
No, sir.
As far as motive, the prosecution claims the 28-year-old officer was ambitious and wanted to move to narcotics as quickly as possible. Wester testified he never planted any drugs.
The drugs were there. I did not put the narcotics there.
And after 5 days and several witnesses, the jury was asked to render a verdict. Wester's found guilty on all charges. He could spend the rest of his life behind bars. After 7 hours, the jury returns with its verdict.
In the state of Florida versus Zachary Tyler Wester, we, the jury, find as follows as to the counts charged in the information. Count 1, guilty of racketeering as charged.
The clerk went on to read the verdict on all 67 charges.
Count 7, guilty of official misconduct as charged.
In total, the crooked officer was found guilty on 19 charges.
Count 9, guilty of official misconduct as charged. Count 10, guilty of official misconduct as charged.
Including misconduct in the arrests of Van and Teresa Odom. 11 of the 12 drivers filed civil lawsuits against Wester. In July 2021, he was sentenced to 12 and a half years in a state prison. Next, we head to Butler County, Ohio for the trial of Daniel French. He's charged with aggravated murder, burglary, and robbery in the brutal death of 87-year-old Barbara Howe. French allegedly posed as a maintenance worker, a job he once held at the retirement community, to get inside the victim's home. The plan was a simple robbery, but that plan went horribly wrong, and after French's own brother notified police, French confessed to the crime.
What was your intention going in a house that day? Just get money. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to hit her because I didn't want to harm her, and I figured stuff up. It didn't work. And I freaked. She said, "What are you doing?" And I just, "Oh God, what did I do?" And I grabbed her and put her down, and I was trying to choke her out. I didn't mean to kill her, you know. I removed the crossface hatch. I tried to lower her, but she fell. Before I did that, I tried to remove the evidence. I tried to make it look worse. Slowly.
To avoid the possibility of the death penalty, French agreed to plead guilty. The state said no deal, and the case went to trial. The defense argued the murder was accidental, but the prosecution claimed that French knew exactly what he was doing.
This defendant had no intention of harming her, killing her. His opportunity at that moment was to do what? Scoot right out the door.
In addition to DNA evidence, the prosecution relied on French's own words from an interview with police.
I don't want death. I deserve death. You think you deserve death because of what you did there? Yes. Well, why do you feel that way? A life for a life. I see remorse. You don't know how much more remorse I got. It's been eating at you, hasn't it? Have you ever seen a ghost? I've seen Miss Howell's ghost, and I apologize.
The defense didn't call a single witness, and it took the jury only an hour and 20 minutes to reach its verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of aggravated murder.
Before French was sentenced, the victim's family delivered impact statements, none more powerful than Howe's daughter, Donna.
I wanted everybody to hear what you did. I wanted to make sure they knew what a deviant monster you are. You beat her. You stripped her of her dignity. You stuffed her naked body in a crawl space, and you almost took her head off. She loved living, and you robbed her and us of many years. I will never forgive you, and you better rot in hell.
As per the jury's recommendation, French was spared the death penalty, but he was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. Next, we're in Grand Rapids, Michigan for a video court hearing. The defendant, identified as Vaughn Foote, was charged with drunk driving and is about to be arraigned.
Is it Mr. Foote?
That is, if he and the judge can work out some technical difficulties.
Can you hear me, sir? We cannot hear you.
After some awkward silence and blank stares, Judge Sarah Smolensky offers up some tech support.
I don't know if you can hear us, but you have to unmute yourself. There's a microphone-like device with a red line through it. You have to click on it.
Solid advice. Should do the trick. And then, nothing. With technology failing her, the judge decides to go old school and presents the defendant with a handwritten note. But when the defendant still doesn't respond, Judge Smolensky tries to open another line of communication. To help sell the request, she even plays charades from the bench.
Give us your phone number. Phone.
Perhaps the swinging of the phone is the judge's way of saying tick-tock as the silence is approaching 6 minutes. Finally, it appears something gets through to the defendant, and he stands up and walks away.
He's trying to do something. Just write it down.
In the background, a good boy makes a quick cameo.
Nice dog.
Eventually, the defendant returns with his phone number written on a piece of paper.
There we go. Let's put it up a little bit.
And Judge Smolensky makes the call.
Hello? Okay, Mr. Foote. Finally, we can talk.
After connecting by phone, Vaughn Foote pleaded guilty to operating with a blood alcohol level of 0.17 or higher and was sentenced to 2 days in jail with credit for 2 days' time served and 1 year probation.
This is one of the most ghastly crimes I've ever seen. The hottest places in hell are reserved for people like you.
We're in Canton, Ohio for the case of 73-year-old Philip Snyder. 7 months earlier, Snyder said his wife of 53 years died during a road trip the couple were taking to Graceland in Tennessee. But when his story didn't add up, family members contacted police and they paid him a visit.
You guys okay?
I'm okay, yes.
Okay.
My wife passed away.
Snyder claimed that just 4 days earlier, his wife died of a medical emergency near Graceland.
She choked on her phlegm. She kept She'd been choking for quite a year.
Okay.
And she wanted to go down one more time before she died. I think she knew she was going to die.
The already fishy story became more questionable when Snyder claimed he simply gave his wife's body to paramedics.
Well, so what happened? So where's your wife now? What happened to her?
They took her to a place where they cremate people.
Okay, and you don't know where that is either?
No.
Police became even more suspicious during follow-up interviews when details of Snyder's story changed, and they were unable to find any record of his wife being admitted to a cremation facility in Tennessee. Investigators didn't have enough evidence to charge Snyder with any crime. So for him, life continued as usual, including daily coffee and conversation with other locals around town.
You enjoying this weather?
But unknown to Snyder, the person indulging him in conversation today is actually undercover police officer Joan Bauer, who's been sent in to crack the case.
What's your name?
Who?
I'm Missy. Yeah, nice to meet you.
In the weeks that followed, Bauer befriended Snyder and earned his trust. All the while, their conversations were being recorded.
It's gonna be nice tomorrow. You want to go for a walk tomorrow? Maybe.
Over time, Bauer got him to open up about his wife's death and the story he told police.
What I did first was I said the paramedics in Memphis took her because she died on the way to Memphis.
Oh, okay.
Officer Bauer continued pressing Snyder for details, but no one could have imagined what came out of his mouth next.
Can you imagine a hammer this big and this big around?
Like a mallet?
Yeah, 2 pounds.
Okay.
Just scenario.
Right.
Say I bonked her in the head.
Right.
And her tongue came out. Just scenario.
Right.
And I put a bag over her head.
The recorded conversation is enough for police to make an arrest later that day, believing Snyder killed his wife in their home before ever leaving for a road trip.
Step up. You're kidding.
Step up.
You're kidding.
Fun and games are over.
Philip Snyder was charged with aggravated murder and gross abuse of a corpse. No motive was established for the killing. Now in court, he's looking to solidify a plea agreement with the state, which calls for him to disclose the whereabouts of his wife's body in exchange for a recommended life sentence with parole eligibility after 20 years.
To the charge of aggravated murder, how do you plead? Is there anything that you would like to say prior to the sentencing?
I put her in the Tennessee River. That's where I put her.
All right, so you tell me you put your wife in the Tennessee River.
Yes, sir.
Are you willing to take law enforcement to the area where you placed her in the Tennessee River?
If I have to, yes. Yes, sir.
Well, in this particular case, I'm going to make sure that you do it. The family, I've been told, would like some closure. To the charge of aggravated murder, how do you plead?
He's pled guilty to killing his wife, but before he learns his sentence, a member of the victim's family has asked the court if he could give a victim impact statement. That family member is his own son.
The man sitting before you is not the father I know. He is not the man who raised me, teaching you many things of which one was to have honor and respect. I see no honor and certainly no respect in his actions leading up to the day.
And finally, Judge Frank Forchon has some harsh words of his own to share.
Now, to me, to accept this agreement between the state and your counsel and you, it sickens me. This is one of the most ghastly crimes I've ever seen. You're going to die in prison. That's the legacy that you left this family. And the last comment that I will make to you, sir, is this, and I hope you think about this for the rest of your life. The hottest places in hell are reserved for people like you. As to the aggravated murder, I'm going to sentence you to life imprisonment with parole eligibility after serving 20 years of imprisonment. Like I said before, you're going to die in prison.
Following the hearing, Snyder changed his story again, claiming he dumped his wife's body in a dumpster in Kentucky. Her remains have yet to be found. Joining us now is Officer Joan Bauer, who you didn't see there, but you heard her voice. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So have you done undercover work like this before?
Yes. I've been a police officer for 31 years, and I'd say probably 26, 27 of them were undercover.
And how long did it take you to gain his trust?
You know what? It really didn't take too long. It was about 4 weeks total.
Take us through that moment where he's basically confessing to how he killed his wife.
Honestly, when he first told me, I was sick to my stomach. Like, I honestly thought he has to see this on my face because I think I turned green. I mean, it really was sort of revolting, and I wasn't expecting it the way he told it.
Can you imagine a hammer this big and this big around?
Like a mallet?
Yeah, 2 pounds.
Okay.
Just scenario.
Right.
Say I bonked her in the head.
Right.
It's still sort of spine tingling to me.
It sounds like this confession was almost worse than you expected.
It definitely was worse. It was worse because it came so like matter of fact when he said, imagine this, and it was almost like he was excited to tell me. Like I said, I've done undercover for a long time, but I've never had someone like that. It was pretty much a shock.
So did I hear correctly that he thought the two of you were going to get married?
Yes. I told him that I had to be truthful. How could I marry somebody who isn't truthful, that I trusted him, and I was okay with his answer. And so that's why he can, and I also agreed to kiss him on the cheek.
So you said you have to be truthful and then I'll marry you? And that's how it led to him confessing?
He thought that we were going to get married. He actually, it's pretty interesting because he somewhat was thinking, in the state of Ohio, you can't make a spouse testify against another spouse. And he felt like that was going to keep me safe. He was worried about me. He was worried about the police questioning me. He was worried about all that. He sort of thought that would keep him safe. So at least that's the way I like to think about it, that was what he was thinking. But there was never any romantic talk of marriage. It was convenience for him. He was all about Bill. He didn't care what he had done. He would have done it again. He made that very clear.
So you agreed to kiss him on the cheek?
Right, I know. But hey, it was a life. He said I had to agree. And to say the truth, after he confessed, and he asked me for the kiss, and I was really sort of sick to my stomach, but at the same time, I didn't know if I had the audio and video. What if I didn't? So I can't say no. What if I have to come back at him later that day that the audio and video failed?
Officer Joan Bauer, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's it for this edition of Court Cam. I'm Dan Abrams. Thanks for watching.